Hi everybody, Adrian Plass here,
Yes, and Bridget. Hello.
and it's not really a landmark, but I think it's 250 Sounding the Shadows is since we started doing this, and that's one a week. I started dividing it by all the wrong numbers to work out how many years it was. But I
What
suppose
did you come up with?
Oh, I don't know, something ridiculous. Anyway, it's quite a long time, 250 of them.
Quite
Anyway,
a long
we're here.
time. Quite a long time. I wish we
Yeah.
could say any differently, but we started with No Shore in Sight, and then we moved on to Sound in the Shallows. And I can't imagine anybody really feeling that we're anywhere near very safe shore to land on at the moment. In fact, I was talking to our son this morning, and there's no doubt that the business world all over Europe and probably in America as well are anxious and oppressed and fearful, let alone people in Ukraine and some of the other countries that are bordering Russia. It's a very uneasy feeling all round, I think.
Makes me feel sick sometimes, just the news. Anyway, in that connection, we had a couple of emails. We had actually a few that are really interesting. I wish we could do more today, but one was from somebody talking about how things are a bit doom laden at the moment, and how about going back to one of the very first books I wrote, which was The Sacred Diary of Adrian Plass, and read a bit over the
That's
next
a good
few
idea.
weeks. So I found just the beginning of it, and in a way, the two people who've emailed might be talking about the same thing, because I was thinking today that when I wrote The Sacred Diary, I was feeling trapped, I suppose, more by the inability to be truthful in the church than I wanted to be, which is ridiculous. And when you think that we have headlines about truth
And freedom.
and freedom,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
when I first started writing, the very words I'm going to read now, I sensed the freedom that there was, and that a sort of strangely shaped joy about managing to actually say things.
Well, can I just also say, Adrian, I mean, it was a freedom to be able to say whatever you wanted to say, but it was also, I mean, you'd had to stop work, and I know for some people that can sound so frightening, and it was on one level for us, but just sometimes being forced to take a break, forced to sort of, draw a line for a while at least, is something I've met many people who've said, actually, suddenly there is a peculiar sense of freedom in that.
Yeah.
All the responsibility just for a little while is lifted from your shoulders. So anyway.
So somebody who, I think he was the deputy editor of one of the Christian magazines back then, which was 84, 85.
Well, the diary book came out in 87, so this was before that.
It was before that, of course. And the Adrian Mole books were obviously doing phenomenally well. And he said, what about doing a column that is about...
Well, Adrian Mole was 13 3/4, was he, in the books?
Something like
that, yeah.
It was about doing something about the Secret Diary of Adrian Plass, which is how it started. It wasn't originally the Sacred Diary.
And originally it was the Secret Diary of Adrian Mole, wasn't it? And that's what triggered off the
yeah.
interest in
That's
this
right,
idea. Yeah.
So, I mean, I thought it would disappear without trace, but it did quite well in the end, I'm pleased to say. Anyway, these were the first words I wrote. And as I said, I felt a cloak falling off me as I wrote them. Saturday, December 14th. Feel led to keep a diary, a sort of spiritual log for the benefit of others in the future. Each new divine insight and experience will shine like a beacon in the darkness. Can't think of anything to actually put in today. Still, tomorrow's Sunday. There must be something on a Sunday, surely. Sunday, December 15th. Another commercial Christmas. I shall send only 10 cards this year. I mean, what is Christmas about after all? I must say, our church is getting like an auction room. One blink and you get ministered to. Sit still and keep your eyes shining. That's my motto. This morning was Edwin Burlsford's fault, our elder. 45 minutes on sin. A record 9 fruit gum talk. Halfway through, I was checking supplies when Edwin suddenly shouted, "Lust!" and made me drop the packet under my chair. So I put my head down between my knees to locate it, and then I couldn't get up because Doreen Cook pressed her hands down on the back of my head. She prayed that our despairing brother would move from darkness to light. Well, I was all for that. I couldn't see a thing. When she let me get up, she had one of those roguish Christian smiles on her face. I came very close to really giving her something to forgive me for. Everyone thinks I've got a big lust problem now. At coffee time, they all smiled reassuringly at me, which was even worse, and Leonard Thynne hugged me. I signed Edwin's carol singing list for next Saturday to show that I'm not all bad. And that's how it began.
And that's how it began.
And it went on from there.
Gosh. And I don't know, the very fact that when the book became the Sacred Diary, people needed to be able to laugh about some of the things that they got twisted up in, because the church has always only been people, and it always will only be people, so things will inevitably get a bit screwed up at times.
But there was no sense of mission in it. I had no intention of changing the church.
No, I know.
I just enjoyed writing and just making myself laugh, actually, saying what I actually thought. So
it is one of the things, I mean, humour, which we probably didn't realise because there wasn't an awful lot of it about at the time. And humour was one of the ways that somehow wiggled through the defences. And we were talking last week, weren't we, because it was World Poetry Day, about the fact that poetry can do the same. It can kind of get in through the defences we put up.
Sometimes, yeah.
Well, no, not always.
Yeah, no, it can. For me, it's one of its functions. Absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, that suggestion was from a very good friend in Canada.
Yes, it was.
So thank you for that. I think it's a really good idea. Yeah.
Well, the other email that really maybe affected us a lot this week is partly because of who it came from, because it came from somebody who's been with us on this journey, No Shore in Sight and Sound in the Shallows from the very beginning. One of the first times she wrote was after we'd been talking in depth about fruit, which sounds so long ago, Adrian.
Well, I don't know.
We were talking about different fruit and what fruit you liked and didn't, and we had quite a few emails about...
This is her only fault. I mean, she's a fine poet, and she's I think, a wonderful person in many ways, but the banana angle is all wrong. And in fact, even this time was signed from your banana chief, hater-in-chief. But I think God is working on that. I really do.
Well, there were two things that, one thing, you were talking about what furnishes your mind last week, and that poetry has been something that has furnished your mind. And she was talking, to start off with, about how when she was at primary school, there was an after-school club called Choral Speaking, and she loved it. She loved the fact that you had to learn poems, and then you would perform them as a group. And she said it was almost like a choir, and the teacher would get you, some bits would be in unison, speaking in unison, little solo bits, a few actions put into it, taking a breath at the same time. I mean, what a wonderful thing.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Allowing the rhythm, and then apparently all the primary schools, and we are talking 5 to 11-year-olds here, would get together and would have a competition. It reminded me of so many things that maybe we've lost, where those things seemed incredibly important. Yeah. And of course they are, but in a world that's overwhelmingly busy, maybe they don't. I'd love to hear if we have any primary teachers who listen to this as to whether these type of things still happen. But I love the idea that it furnished your mind.
Well, our writer says, she says, if I've got this right, that a lot of those poems that they perform together are still firmly lodged in her memory banks.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic to have them there. I said this last week, but I can't say it enough as far as I'm concerned. They mean so much to me.
But interestingly, Adrian, I mean, you were talking last week a bit, and you've talked about it before, about how you and your brothers had access to all sorts of different types of books.
That's right.
Without deciding whether these were the right number of words for 7 to 8 year olds or whatever. They just were. And I was very struck by the poem that she goes on to talk about. At primary school, they were looking at this poem.
I wonder if they understood. It doesn't actually, in many senses, it doesn't matter if you don't totally understand.
No, and I doubt very much whether they did. It's by somebody called Maya Angelou.
And I remember this poem.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it for a long time, and
No.
I was so pleased to have it, to be reminded of it, and also reminded that it's the same title as Maya Angelou's autobiography, which is called I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings.
Well, for our friend who wrote, this has particular pertinence now because she's ill, but I think it has a pertinence for a lot of people who in some way do become caged, whether it's by circumstances, by illness, by disappointment, sometimes by isolation. There are a lot of reasons, or just, I think you felt, for example, as I just said, you were pretty caged by running a secure unit and every day being full of pressure, and although you enjoyed it in some ways, I think an awful lot of people are living under so much pressure. But in her particular case, it's the illness. Anyway, I'll have a go at reading it. The free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wings in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade wind soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, as he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied. So he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. She sent us another poem, which maybe we'll have a look at next week.
Yeah, another very good poem, yeah. And
But
maybe read one or two of her poems as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, a particular quote that you've loved and introduced me to by C.S. Lewis about being homesick for a place you've never seen. That there's that, we are all, in a sense, caged birds. I mean, we are limited. We can't fly. We can't change the situation in the world at the moment. We can't make things happen. I love those final lines, that the idea that it's heard, that somehow it's heard on a distant hill, that, and open your mouth and sing.
Yeah, I like the fact that it's just as loud. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, and even as I said that, our little cuckoo clock bird came out and decided he'd had enough of listening to us talking about birds that are caged and tried to sing.
Can you hear him? You may not be able to hear him. He's very pretty voice, really.
Yeah.
But
Now, I was thinking about ways in which people are caged, because, the person who wrote to us, who sent this poem, is in a particular situation where her life is so limited,
yeah.
and yet her mind certainly is not.
No.
She has a very clear view of things, very, very clear view of things. And I love hearing from her because she always has something really, I don't know, something always touches me from what she says. In this case, I think being able to see that poem again and hear it again is wonderful. But I was thinking through today when I was looking at it about the ways in which people are caged. I mean, I remember just the other day sitting with someone, not here at home but somewhere else, who was, throughout our conversation, I didn't say very much, which I've discovered is a very good idea. Throughout our conversation, that I would say something and she would say, "Can you really say that?" And then I'd say something else a little later. If I did say something, say, "Well, I don't think I feel I can just quite go." There seemed to be a policeman at every corner of what that person was thinking about when she, in this case, to do with churchmanship, I think, to do with what you're allowed to do, to do with what you're allowed to think. There's I'm sure I've quoted it a billion times, Jesus saying to the disciples, it says he opened their minds. And we also talked last week about flavour and how we lose the flavour.
And I was thinking about that, by the way, just before you carry on. You said about salt, we were talking about how salt adds flavour. And I was thinking, it does, unless you put too much salt. And I think sometimes Christian teaching and ways we ought to be, they're like too much salt. And all you can taste is salt.
That? I'm losing the metaphor here
a bit. No, not really, because it just tastes
all you
of
taste
salt.
Is the salt.
You just taste salt. And you don't get the flavour of what somebody is talking about. You just get a big old salt shower in you. I think ego can be like that. It can feel like too much salt, and all you can taste, if you like, if you're talking taste and flavour, is what that person wants you to feel about them. I think that's one thing. Too much of anything, really.
Yeah.
Maybe I've gone off on rather a strange tangent.
No,
what were you about to say about
those two things that are supposed to be so important, salt and light, are hardly ever really analysed in detail. Someone's now going to say to me they're very, very carefully organised in some publication.
Oh, I'm sure they are. There's been books written about lots of things that we haven't read, so of course.
But certainly using, well, it depends how you define the salt, but there has to be something that brings out the flavour of the most important thing in the world, whichever you decide that is. For us, it's a person. For others, it will be something else. And I was also thinking today about the old imposter syndrome. The fear that you don't merit your position, that although you've accomplished something, it hasn't taken you anywhere, because you still drag your miserable self with you. And whatever happens. I mean, I can remember someone saying to me, I just feel, I don't know what else I can do. I just feel diminished. And saying to that person, but you've done this and you've done that and you've achieved that. And actually, I was trying to be encouraging, of course. And they said, well, yeah, but I'm still me. The one of the central and most difficult areas of the entire Christian faith is that you will only have an imposter syndrome if you try to match your calling or your success or whatever it is you happen to have done, because the main call is to follow.
Yeah,
it's not to become a wonderful person. It's not to work so hard that you achieve it. It's not even to find the best part of yourself, because that's not what's called for. What is called for is something that many of us, including myself, for a long time, have been very wary of, which is obedience, which is finding out what you're supposed to be doing. And then, when you're doing that, all of your qualities all of the things that are best about you will be invaluable. But if you lose heart and you jump forward and you say, none of that has worked, I feel the same old me, it's never going to work. You're never going to win.
I mean, it just made me think about the first disciples, if you like, that had to learn all the same things.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
That it wasn't about them, but it was about them. In other words, they had to be, they themselves, in their human body, had to do things, had to, if you like, be obedient. I mean, I've always thought that the moment when Jesus ascends into heaven and he has told them, go back to Jerusalem and wait, that they did. I've always thought that that was an extraordinary moment of obedience, because all of her common sense would say, let's scarper, let's hide, let's get away from the city of Jerusalem, where they have just killed.
Well, they did hide in Jerusalem.
Well, they hid, but they went back and they waited.
Yes, they did. Yeah,
I doubt if there was very many safe places to hide.
So why do you think they did go back?
Well, because they'd learnt, I think, to trust that if that's what he said, then that's the plan. You know, follow the plan. But I don't know. It isn't much different, I don't think, in the sense that obedience is probably, you know, if you're going to follow, you've got to get up and follow, I suppose. I don't know.
Well, I don't know what the other course would be, but that's just my view. And I was thinking there's so many forms of caging, though. Your past, the thing and the things that affected you so profoundly that it's very hard to believe anything is going to seriously change. And I've met people, and you've met people.
I've met myself.
Well, you've met yourself, yes, I know. Well, I've met myself. But within the sort of Christian context, people who had an appalling time as children, were abused as children, asked God to stop it. He didn't.
Oh, well, that's the really serious one, isn't it?
Yeah, but now they want to be followers of Jesus. They want to spread the gospel. And I sit in wonder and say, tell me how the first bit or the second bit has survived the first bit. But the fact is that something happens to people, not everybody, but some people, something enters into them that is, perhaps it's beckoning from a distance, perhaps it's a smile in the far distance, perhaps it's a concealed knowledge, almost concealed to them, that there is something worth pushing forward to. But I've never been able to completely understand what happens in the gap between the first of those experiences and the desire to have more of the person who seemed to let you down so appallingly. But I also have a lot of contact, as you know, with people who are really trying to move forward and working hard at it. But it will never happen if you try to make it not have happened in the past.
But it is part, isn't it, of allowing that the scars are part of the journey. They are part of you. They can be used for good. They can be, even that, you talked about the imposter syndrome. I mean, you know, I think an awful lot of people who maybe are more like us, who haven't been through the appalling experience you've just mentioned, but who, we've all been scarred in some ways, and I think it's a case of taking all of you to get on and follow.
Yeah.
You can't use it as an excuse to stop, to feel I'm not, I'm too much of an imposter, I'm not up to it, because that's not the job.
Anyway, we have to end, and seeing as my friend said that, shall I read one more bit from the diary quickly?
Of course.
Which is a bit lighter.
And Gracie's now gone into her bed and is going wild, so if you hear a lot of scrabbling and scratching, that's our dog.
So, Saturday, February 8th. Thought there might be something in the Christian bookshop about confusion, because I feel very confused. When I asked the shopkeeper, he said, confusion? As though I'd asked for a bag of coal. Finally unearthed a tape cassette at the back of the Christian plumbing shelf,
which there used to be,
entitled Collected Correctional Courses for Confused Christians by Dr. William Worplesdon of Winderlene Worplesdon, as he's commonly known. I settled down this evening to listen, really looking forward to hearing something that would be helpful. This is how the tape went. My name is Worplesdon. Greetings to you, confused brother or confused sister. My message divides into 3 sections, the first of which consists of 2 parts. Part A being approached from 4 perspectives, the most immediate of which could be subdivided into 2 areas. The initial one breaking down into 4 main categories, beginning with a multifaceted topic, the primary facet being contained under 6 main headings. And I'd like to look at number 1 from 2 points of view. The first consisting of 5 components, the commencing item of which falls naturally into 7 sections, starting with a 3-point introduction to part 1 of the opening item in the first stage of the primary point of a 6-step argument on the subject of confusion in the church. And I think that's all that needs to be said about that. And with that welter of confusion, we'll leave you.
Yes, but we would so love to hear any connection with anything at all, or simply anything at all.
Yeah.
Goodbye. Speak to you next week.